Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on crime and punishment is Ephraim Lowy. To join the conversation with Mr. Davis and Mr. Lowy, please dial 332-263-3300. That's 332-263-3300. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Lowy.
I'm delighted to welcome back my precious listeners. And after a 2-week hiatus for the Jewish holidays, you're in for an exciting, I believe, a very exciting, informative, and I hope enjoyable discussion of my views and the contrary views on the penalty of on the death penalty for murder. So Mr. Lowy here is replacing David Seidemann, Rabbi David Seidemann, who was called up for an emergency. And so Mr. Lowy is, I'm told, is brilliant, and it's really very creative and very nice of him, very, very generous of him to come on such short notice. But I wanted somebody who could replace the wisdom of Rabbi Seidemann and give some of the views that his views, and particularly the biblical views on the death penalty that that David was going to provide. So without further ado, let's get into this discussion of the appropriateness of the righteousness of the death penalty. And I want to tell you right off the bat that I'm in favor of the death penalty for premeditated murder, for vicious, horrendous murder of innocent, completely innocent people. And I say that because I think it's so, they get off so easy with the death penalty, which takes about 1 minute or at most 30 seconds even of pain and suffering for what they did, when in fact the person or persons that they committed these vicious, atrocious crime against, murder against, suffered tremendously during the punishment that they received, and even more than that, will never have the joy or the pleasure of even 1 minute of smile, of interacting with their loved ones, of enjoying anything, whereas the ones who get a life sentence instead of a death penalty, which I must point out, one of the individuals who lost a child in Florida, Park, what was it called, Park slaughter of like 15 young people, said when they learned that the death penalty was not going to be given to the perpetrator, but rather life sentence, said apparently my children's, my child's life and our children's lives are not as important or don't count as much as this man's life, the one who perpetrated the crime. So, and and the suffering of their family and their extended family, for life, they're scarred and hurt and never get over the misery that this murder, this slaughter caused them. So for that reason, I'm against the. What I would like to see instead is when I was young, they had movies showing the what is it called? Work. Len, what's the word that they perpetrated? That they put them to work hard
Forced
work.
labor?
What?
Forced labor?
Yeah, forced labor.
Work
But
camps?
what?
Work
I told
camps?
it to you a few times before. Uh, anyway, they put them out in the field to work hard, 15 hours a day, sweat, suffer. That was a somewhat of a reasonable payback. I forget what they called that. Anyway, it'll come to me. So it should be much more painful and cause more suffering than just an instance of the persecution they supposedly suffer. And even with that, it's been outlawed in many states because imposing the electric chair for their crime or drugs that don't act properly and they suffer for 1 minute or even 30 seconds. That's they claim is disallowed, prohibited by the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. So they no longer even impose a death penalty in most states. So I'm in favor of the death penalty. I don't know what the Bible says. I don't know what Mr. Lowy, who's so brilliant, says. So let's hear from Mr. Lowy. Sorry to take so long.
No worries. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here talking with you. I must say I was lured under mildly false pretenses. Leah told me I was going to be discussing the start of the NBA season with your grandson Eitan this evening, and that's really why I came. But after watching the Lakers last night, I think the death penalty is a more pleasant discussion than the NBA season.
What, for the Warriors?
Yeah, it was super unpleasant. They kind of had the death penalty last night, my Lakers. As you can well imagine, when asked to explain the biblical view on capital punishment, it's not going to be a simple yes or no, right? And
your personal view as well. Do you disagree with me, or do you agree with me, or whatever?
Well, maybe we'll get to that, but let's start with the...
I want to invite on CJ, who writes for the New York Post. At the last minute, we called upon him to join us because I found out at the last minute that Rabbi Seideman was going to be unavailable because of an emergency. So I reached out at the last minute, and I was fortunate to get CJ to join us, a brilliant New York Post journalist. Thank you, CJ, for joining us, and meet Mr. Lowy, who's also at the last...
You're welcome, Morty.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, CJ, virtually.
So I don't know if you heard the introduction.
Hey.
Okay. So now Mr. Lowy is going to give his views, and then I want to hear your brilliant input.
So if we were to sum up the biblical view on capital punishment, it would be really a tale of two theories, right? Or the difference between theory and practice. The Bible is clearly in favor of capital punishment. The Bible prescribes not one, but 4 different capital punishments. Mm-hmm. In Hebrew, they're called skila, sreifa, harag, and chenek. In English, it would be stoning, burning, asphyxiation, and beheading. So there are definitely 4 types of capital punishment, which the Torah prescribes for many different sins. However, in practicality, it seems to be the opposite. And the simple way to highlight this difference between theory and practice, I will call to mind the case of the Ben Sorer Umorah The case of the Ben Saramora is almost the most egregious case of capital punishment, or the most liberal usage of it in the Torah, where a 13-year-old is potentially put to death for stealing a certain amount of wine and meat from his parents. And it's
that's worse than murder.
That's worse than, well, the way the Torah describes it is he's so on such a bad path that it'll only end in murder. And in the words of the Torah, it's Yamas Zakai Val Yamas Chayev, let us put him to death before he commits murder. But the Talmud says that this story never actually happened, right? So whereas the Torah is prescribing the death penalty, in practicality, what was done throughout history is every attempt to not prescribe the death penalty. And you have a very specific Mishnah in Makos Tav Zayin, where the Tanaim debate whether a Bezdin was the method of adjudication back then, the tribunal, if they put someone to death once every 70 years, they consider that a bloody Bezdin.
Once every 70 years?
Well, there's one opinion once every 7, and another opinion once every 70.
Oh.
And the great sage Rabbi Akiva, whom we are all familiar with, says that if he were there, nobody would ever get the capital punishment. But the counterparty to Rabbi Akiva, Reb Shimon Gamliel, states what you clearly stated, that Rabbi Akiva, if you had your way, there would be a lot more murders. So clearly they were debating whether capital punishment...
If I had my way, there would be a lot more murders?
Not if Rabbi Akiva had his way. If he abolished the death penalty, there would be a lot more murders. So clearly this opinion seems to feel like you, Mr. Davis, that the capital punishment serves as a very strong deterrent, right? The last section in the Talmud that I'll point to is the Gemara says that 40 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, the Sanhedrin, right, the Bezdin, the court that tried capital cases, went into Gulf. They went into exile. They left their home base. And the reason they left their home base is because there were so many murders, right, and they were trying so many capital cases, they felt they did not want to try those capital cases. And they were only allowed to try the capital cases in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple. And that's why they went into exile. So you see their response to there being more capital cases was not to increase the death penalty, but was to decrease the death penalty. What they did, they felt very, very uncomfortable ever putting a man to death. So whereas, again, straight up biblical view, there are clearly 4 types of capital punishment, and murder is definitely deserving of one, although interestingly enough, it's deserving of the least strict of the capital punishments. It's what's called hereg. But you see that throughout history, the powers that be did everything they could to avoid capital punishment at all costs. So again, I believe it's a difference between theory and practice here. And why don't we give the floor to CJ to see if
I
he has
clearly
anything to add.
disagree with the Torah's approach. But also, I guess they modify, unlike Scalia, they adapt it to reality and they have some empathy. And even though it says an eye for an eye, there's other ways you can deal with that, despite what it says specifically in the Bible, in the Old Testament. So we have ways to overcoming that. Or the Torah has ways, our forefathers found ways that you don't have to necessarily have an eye for an eye, but you can pay in some other way equivalent. Okay, CJ.
Yes, sir.
CJ, let's get your brilliant wisdom on this subject.
Well, yeah, that's a real personal. Like, I'm really anti-crime. What's going on in New York now is just bizarre. However, personally, I'm against the death penalty, mainly because I was raised Catholic, follow the scripture of Jesus Christ, turn the other cheek. The difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament. I'm not saying that Old Testament's wrong or the New Testament's right. I guess it was all a matter of how we were raised. And it just doesn't feel right, me letting the state do something I might do. I might kill someone that killed one of my near and dear children or, anyone in my family. I am a flawed human being, but I don't want to see the state do it because I think that people in this society now are able to buy justice. If you have enough money and you can hire a lawyer, guns, and money, you can get away with murder, probably. And if you're poor, you're fodder for the machine. And it just rankles me. And I'm not even disagreeing. I hear what Morty was saying about, that they should suffer, and I get all that. I'm just, it's just how my faith in Jesus, which, I was raised on, translates it. I'm not saying anyone's wrong. It's just my personal belief. I understand people being pro-death penalty, sort of like a critic, I would imagine, I guess. But it just, I would, I know it's going to sound weird, but I would feel cowardly letting someone else do what I should do, which is take out someone that took out my loved one. I know that's completely contradictory, but I would have to face Jesus on my own and judgment and, admit to being a flawed human being, I guess. It's a tough subject, man. It's been outlawed. I don't know if they're still doing them in Texas. The jury's out on myself. Is it a deterrent? Maybe. I'm not saying unequivocally no. I'm not so sure. I think a lot of crimes done spur of the moment, particularly crimes of passion. A lot of murders done in spur of the moment. Now, Morty had mentioned something about pre-planned. Yeah, that's really foul. I mean, when you're gonna invade someone's home and execute them, and you have it all planned out. That raises the bar now. So it's a tough subject. I think I would not protest either way. I mean, I guess if it was put to a ballot, I'd vote with my conscience how I would see fit to vote. But I wouldn't judge anyone for voting the other way either. I do get both sides of that story. It's a tough, it's an emotional, tough thing, and then victims of crime, people who've had, close family members murdered. It's horrible. I mean, I knew a girl I grew up with in the Bronx whose kid was killed up in Sandy Hook.
Oh my God!
I don't know how they didn't go after Alice Jones. Like if I was her husband, Alice Jones, I would have attacked him by now. I mean, calling me a false actor and, he didn't do the act of the insane kid that shot up at school, but, geez, I don't know.
CJ, I want to tell you, your position is very admirable. I'm impressed with your empathy, and even if I'm even more impressed and would be admiring of you, rather than find you guilty, I would exonerate you if the state didn't take somebody out that killed your child, and you did it yourself. I would do the same thing. I would do the same thing. If somebody did my child, right? If somebody did my child, God forbid, or my grandchild,
Right.
or anybody I loved, I would be so emotionally angry and bitter, and I would do it myself. But of course, I'm much older than you, so I'm not giving up much time. If they, I don't even, at my age, I don't even buy green bananas. So if they took my life, it wouldn't be a big tragedy.
That was funny.
Yeah, thank you. The death penalty that I'm against, and I'm writing this in my next book, is the death penalty that comes to innocent young men and women that we send off to war. From both, I'm even sympathetic, and it hurts me that we kill the enemy's young people. The two are killing each other, even though they have no specific animosity to the ones that are killed.
Well, you know what soldiers say, Morty? They're not fighting for a flag. They're not fighting for a cause. They're fighting for the guy next to them.
Yeah, but if
That's
we
what they
didn't
fight
if
for.
we didn't enter the wars, nobody wins a war. At the end of the war, both sides
Yeah, you're right.
are major losers, and not only that, but for the ones that aren't killed, you know how many we got. We recently, well, not recently, some years ago, we lost the last survivor of the second the World War II, who was housed all these years in a veterans hospital or institution.
Are you saying America should not have entered World War II?
That's different. If you're attacked, and the great thing about the United
Had they
States,
not been attacked? Would you have?
we've
not
never been attacked on our ground.
I'm sorry.
The United States has never been attacked on its
own soil.
on land. But I definitely agree with. I would have entered the Second World War.
But my question is, if the Japanese did not bomb Pearl Harbor, do you
No,
feel America
I
should
was.
have entered?
Yeah, and we had tons of volunteers that went. People that didn't have to go went. So, that was a justified war, and I even admired Chamberlain, even though he was criticized so badly for going to Germany and saying he got Hitler to avoid invading Austria, or I forget what it was called, the Sudetenland or something. Sudetenland. As a matter of fact, recently, I felt strongly that we were remiss in not testing Putin for his statement. He said, if you don't allow Ukraine to join the NATO, I won't start any war. Now, it would be, I'd be criticized badly because I'd be like Chamberlain. Chamberlain died afterwards because, nevertheless, he came back and said that they'll peace forever or something after I arranged this with Hitler. And there wasn't, and he was criticized, and he died heartbroken not long afterwards. But I admire the fact that he made an attempt to do it diplomatically and peacefully. He did the same thing anyway, but it didn't matter. The same with if Putin, if Biden said, we're going to let you off the hook right now. We won't let him. We will agree not to let them into NATO because we don't need them in NATO. They don't strengthen NATO, and just because they want it doesn't mean we have to have it. As a matter of fact, I'll go back further. The minute the Cold War ended, and the Russians broke off the complete Soviet Union and behaved in a manner that was really, should be praised and was admirable. The first thing we did is we put missiles in Poland and Hungary as if they're the worst enemy. They should have taken Russia into the NATO and say, look, you guys now are good guys. We want you on our team. What? What did you say, CJ?
We might not have won Europe.
If what?
Russia.
Well, I think the
I'm
purpose
saying,
of
I'm saying post-Cold War, after they broke up the Soviet Union, and they did something admirable by breaking up the Soviet Union. They spun off all these nations that were part of the Soviet Union. So we should have recognized the good deed they'd done and take them into NATO instead of immediately putting missiles right on their border. I want to ask you something. How would you feel, or how would the United States feel if we did the same thing that Ukraine is doing to Russia by putting, or NATO did to Russia by putting troops and missiles in Bermuda and Bahamas and Cuba? We almost had a world war because of Cuba and the Russians putting missiles there. So we don't try to make peace before we make war. So I'm saying my goal would be to outlaw wars completely, have all the nations contribute to an army, not the UN, because the UN never acts, but a new army that would be in control of avoiding all wars. And anybody that starts a war gets attacked by this group. That's it. And Monroe in the Monroe Doctrine even warned us not to get involved with any country other than North or South America. We get into the United States. If you look back, is the most warlike since the Second World War. The most warlike. We've been in so many wars that we didn't have to be in, and we entered. I don't know why we entered the Korean War, or they didn't attack us, or the war in Vietnam. That was so painful. We lost so much treasure and blood and so much. It's horrible. It's horrendous. I would be in favor of wars if they made a law only people over 65 could get drafted. Because if you're over 65, if the guy's running away,
How about we send Congress?
you'd rather
Congress.
yeah, you'd rather take let's Congress. If you're over 65, you'd rather take a nap, or you're not going to run after the guy, and and if they got wounded or killed, their wives would be, so proud. My husband would got a Purple Heart because or even they get a Gold Star. The loss isn't that dramatic, and at least he dies as a hero. But under 65, that we take our most precious future, our most lovable and cherished young people, and send them off to get killed and to kill others. It's outrageous. We're uncivilized. You'd think after all these years, and it's inevitably going to lead to somebody using a nuclear weapon. And it's not like the weapon. It's not like the weapons that we used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But today they jeopardize the whole world. They're 1,000 times stronger than what was dropped on.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of my monologue. I want to hear your brilliance.
Go
CJ?
ahead, President.
CJ?
Well,
Well, let's hear your brilliance.
the problem
I'm sorry
with
for the
Biden-
monologue. But I did tell you I admired your Christian view, your view, although the part about turning the other cheek is somewhat misunderstandable to me. But other than that, I admire what your beliefs are, your Christianity,
Yeah,
and
I don't know if I could even do it, Morty.
I'll do it for
I haven't
you.
been too good at
I'll do
telling
it for you. I don't have that much time. Should CJ, if somebody does that, I'll do it for you, because I don't have that much time. I'm giving up.
Bless you. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
The problem Biden waited too long with Putin is what Churchill famously said was, you cannot reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth. It's like this needs to be done early on. Like, sit him down and say, look, and you made a good point. Like, why even Russia and NATO? That would have solved if they were brought in after World War II. And a lot of this would have been resolved. There wouldn't be such,
Yeah, Russia didn't have to be an enemy, right?
I mean, they helped us win World War II. Let's be honest.
Right.
I mean, they were,
Absolutely.
They helped defeat Hitler.
Absolutely.
Not that, us on one side, them on the other. That was,
Yeah, but
Russia was a big help in World War II.
but then Stalin
I don't
killed
think they give
20
enough
million of
credit.
his own people. I think I would very much agree with you, Mr. Davis.
And we shouldn't get involved in civil war. We shouldn't
Well-
try to correct the whole world's behavior. That's not our role.
Where would you draw the line? Because you said that you
That's right.
would have entered World War II, right? Because there was a needless slaughter of, closer to home 6 million Jews, but many more million people.
Not even
worldwide.
not even the Jews, because
If we could,
I was rooting. You and CJ are too young, but I was lived through that period, and I remember Gabriel Heder, who was on, and we didn't have news every hour or every. We had one news at 9 o'clock in the evening, 15 minutes, a half hour, and we didn't get it instantly like we do now. So we didn't even know what was going on. But Gabriel Heder
I
came
was so
on.
much happier.
He came on the air and said, "We're praying that that the Russians should only be able to hold out for another 3-4 weeks." We had in Lawrence here and throughout the states bundles for Russia because we were praying for them. They became the good guys, not voluntarily, because Hitler turned on them.
Right.
I mean, if Hitler didn't kill the Jews and use them for their wisdom and for their science, and as the ones that came here afterwards, Einstein came from Germany and helped develop the atom bomb, and Oppenheimer, who was Jewish, all of them, and the what do you call it? The Russians were on his side, and he turned against them, and it cost them.
But if I were to agree with you that the most precious thing in the world is a human life,
Wait, you're agreeing with
I
me?
agree with you that the
Wait,
most precious thing in the world is a human life.
right.
But why is there a ratio in which an American's life is worth more than another's? Meaning, like if they were
Absolutely not.
okay, so if we
I'm
were to
saying
go to
these
war
young
to
kids-
save lives elsewhere,
these young kids on both sides have no chip on their shoulder to begin with. They have nothing against the guy they're killing or wounding.
But
They
if
have
they-
nothing personal. That they do it because they're told to do it. They're drafted or whatever.
but if their lives being lost elsewhere, would that be a justification for going to war? Would
No.
you go to war to save
No.
lives elsewhere?
No. If there's a civil
the
war,
ratio?
if there's a civil war in a country, it's not our role to clean it up.
What if there's
It's just
ethnic-
like our what did we have? What was it called? The Arab
Spring?
the Arab Spring, that we were going to introduce democracy to all these Arab countries. It's nonsense.
Yeah, how that.
Mary, I'm sorry to keep you, but we have an exciting discussion here, so I'll get to you as soon as I can. Wait, let Mr. Lowy speak. Ephraim.
Yes, again, I think you articulate beautifully. The most precious thing in the world is a human life, and there's absolutely no value we could possibly put on it. It's just hard to figure out what cost of other human lives, right? So if there was a scenario where we're going to war, and again, just to use round mathematical numbers, we would lose 5,000 soldiers, which is a god-awful price to pay. But we were to save 100,000 people in Rwanda from ethnic cleansing. Would you feel that would be an appropriate mathematical trade?
I agree with Monroe doctrine. We should primarily, overwhelmingly stay to protect and defend those in North and South America. That's enough. If there's some, like the Second World War, there's something, then I would agree with you that we have to help England and France and those countries that are unjustly attacked.
Okay, if we
Go back to the death penalty.
Yeah, I think it ties in very much with the death penalty in that discussion. And again, while I laid out the biblical case pro capital punishment, I just want to state personally that perhaps, I think the most sacred element of the U.S. Constitution, and certainly from a personal perspective, which has allowed us to flourish as Orthodox Jews, has been the separation of church and state. And when you're discussing policy, the biblical perspective is not where you want to go, because then you have to hear the caliphate perspective, and then you have to hear every religion's perspective. And I think when discussing policy, you want to rid yourself of the religious view, you want to rid yourself of the emotional view, and you just want to state the facts. And as CJ pointed out, again, I have no opinion, but here are the questions, the framework for how I would think about it. Number one, is it a deterrent? I think there's a lot of debate amongst the scholars.
Definitely a deterrent if the guy is dead. He's not going to kill anybody more else.
Well, is it a deterrent?
It's not a deterrent.
Well, if he's incarcerated for
It's
life,
not
he's also.
I don't think it's a deterrent that prevents people from murdering. When they murder, they're not thinking about it's an emotional thing. It's a hate thing. So they're not. It's not to me. I
Yeah.
don't think of it as a deterrent.
Criminals aren't known.
I know it's a deterrent that the guy who's done it, even an insane guy, won't kill any more.
Got it.
So that's
But-
the deterrent. But I'm saying the equivalent. It aggravates me just as the parent of the person from Parkland said. When they were sitting there hoping that the guy would at least get the death penalty, and she said, apparently our kids' lives don't mean as much as his life. That's outrageous. That's outrageous.
Another question I would ask both of you is what % error rate would you feel is acceptable, right? So if 1 out of every 25 people that gets executed, we would learn at a later date was executed erroneously, would that be acceptable collateral damage? And what would the number have to be? What percentage of collateral damage would you feel is acceptable?
I'd like to think that we could make it tough enough that the jury has to find that it warrants it, and if they make a mistake, that's the price of all justice isn't perfect. So I don't think it's a lot
That's
of
a great
people
question.
I don't think there are a lot of people that are mistakenly killed, murdered by
I
mistake.
would respectfully disagree with that, Morty. I don't think the majority are, but I think a lot of people have been killed.
If it's 1 out of 100, it's a lot, or 2 out of 100, it's a lot.
Yeah, okay. I didn't figure that 1 out of 100, but that's a tremendous amount of innocent people,
Yeah.
getting killed. So 99 we can take care of 99. That's a really great question. What's the acceptable? The acceptable answer, I guess, would be 0, like none. But
Well, you and Ephraim are both great. You Ephraim, you and Mr. Lowy are both great sympathizers, empathizers, and admirable for being so caring. But apparently, you don't feel that way about our sending our young people, including your own kids, to war and taking that punishment, taking that consequence.
That's a good point you brought up.
So clearly,
That's a tough one. I mean, yeah, my father served. That's a tough one. He served because, he felt when the Japanese attacked Hawaii, which at the time was a territory, not a state, that there was reasons to go to war for that. That was his reasoning.
yeah, it wasn't. The Hawaii wasn't.
I never, because of men like him, I never had to make that choice. I was too young for Vietnam. Thank God.
Yeah, thank
I don't
God,
know
right.
how I would have went. But it's a tough question, man. I'm not like
CJ,
I'm kind of agree with you about the Monroe Doctrine. Why don't you just stay on this side? And we can't really be the world's policeman. I mean, that's been our policy for years and years, and we're hated for it. I mean, we try to do good. I do believe we go in with good intent, but it's not appreciated, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe we should just mind our damn business, and But then again, what about the other point raised was what about the innocent people being slaughtered? Do we just leave them to their own devices because they're not American? It's a tough one, man. That's a tough one.
look, the Old Testament says, if you save one life, it's as if you saved the world. So we all value. I like to think we all value lives. But I'm saying when you're dealing with mathematical equations and sympathy and empathy, if there's 4 out of 100 that are killed mistakenly, we don't have any numbers that we consider appropriate or inappropriate when we're killing other people. The people on the other side aren't the young men, young women aren't bad people. They may be, if they were Nazis or something. But in most cases, they do what they're told to do. So
Right,
we
like
should be
like
civilized
us.
enough after all these thousands of years to not behave in such a belligerent way. And incidentally, I'm sure you know that Hawaii was not part of the United States at that time.
Yeah,
It only became a state. Obama was almost not a citizen because it became a state about 10 years before he came to this age.
Like
He was
59, it became a state, or 58.
yeah, something like that, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And Obama came here in 68, or 10 years later, something like
I
that.
mean, he was born in 61.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
you have 3 callers waiting. You have 5 callers waiting. Maybe you want to
Okay,
take a call.
all right, let's take a caller. You're tired of listening to me anyway. Go ahead, who's next? Mary? Mary,
This is Mary Underhill. I live in Seattle. I am interested in ideas about the death penalty. I have a little pen that I have kept for a long time, and it says, "Why do we kill people who kill people?" To show that killing people is wrong. I've basically been against the death penalty all my life until recently, and I will have to admit, as I sat in television watching the Nicholas Cruz jury come back after the Margaret Stoneman Douglas High School killing, I wanted him to get the death penalty. I'll have to admit, and I guess it's revenge, and I think anytime that I have a loved one that was killed, it would be revenge. And I'm not sure that's the noblest of all motives for that.
Understandable.
And I do kind of remember what Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So I think if you keep killing people who have killed people who have killed people, it continues and continues and continues. That was just one of the few things that I wanted to say.
thank you so much. You're like CJ, very admirable, and I appreciate your thinking. You know, I don't know how you'd feel if, God forbid, one of your children or grandchildren or somebody you love very much was killed by somebody. If you wouldn't feel strongly, but you don't know.
I would feel strongly for them to be in the death penalty. That's if someone I love tremendously was killed, yes, I think I would. That feeling is revenge, though.
And Mary, you highlight this point beautifully by pointing out that how within yourself you've had 2 opinions on this. So I'd kind of reflect the question back at you. If you could sit outside yourself and think about which version of you is the pure, kinder, better version, or the version you would choose. Would you choose the one that was against it, or the one that felt specifically for this Mr. Cruz, he should have it?
Well, I normally am against the death penalty, but if I sat and listened to and knew everything that happened that he did, I wanted him to get the death penalty. And I was surprised that the jury did not do that. And I will say that's pure revenge on my part. I felt like what he did was so atrocious that he was one person that deserved the death penalty. But the jury did not feel the same way.
Yeah, and what about the what was the one in Connecticut?
Sandy Hook?
Sandy Hook, where he killed
Right.
20 innocent 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. You know, how could you not wish the worst thing in the world for him? You know, so
Yes.
it's nice to be generous and kind and care about life, but you have to for some behavior you have to make them pay much worse.
Every time I hear that a murderer has been killed either by the police or by suicide, I'm thinking, okay, thank you. We don't have to take the court system to handle
That's
this.
right.
And that, of course, is revenge too.
You know, I would be in favor of never killing anybody if they would be subjected to the phrase I was looking for before was the chain gangs that they used to have. what was the movie Clute with Newman?
Cool Hand Luke.
Clute, Cool Hand,
Cool Hand Luke.
Luke, yeah. That kind of punishment, if they got that kind of punishment, prefer that to death, because I want them to know that they did something wrong, to feel the pain that they gave. That's not revenge. That's
Every day feel it.
right. It was called the chain gang. They worked 12 hours a day. They fed them poorly. The security guards there beat them up. You know, but they enjoy things in life that the one they killed will never ever enjoy, and their extended families and their friends will never have an opportunity to enjoy their presence. So I have no qualms about killing those people, and in war I have qualms about even the enemy's young people getting killed, because there's no reason for it. Look, how many wars have we entered the United States since the end of Second World War? The Korean War, the Vietnam War, 2 Iraqi wars, Afghanistan, 20 years. It cost us trillions of dollars, so much blood and treasure.
The smaller ones, yes.
So much blood and treasure. For what? The only good war that we had in all these years was we attacked Grenada. And Grenada had no army. No, we bombed a lunatic asylum in Grenada. They had no army, and we won real quickly. And as Jackie Mason said one time, he said he's so happy that that Reagan felt we needed to win a war, and he finally win a war, and he attacked Grenada. And now when he goes to sleep at night, he doesn't worry anymore that Grenada would pull a surprise attack on the United States.
Well, after 9/11, I will say that I felt like something should be done in Afghanistan to take down Osama bin Laden, and thank goodness President Obama eventually took down Osama bin Laden.
Mary,
and that took care of that. But then the war in Afghanistan lasted forever.
Mary, I agree with you that something had to be done in response to the killing of 3,000 Americans on, what was it, 9/11?
9/11, yes.
9/11?
Yeah.
9/11. 3,000 of our people. But
Yes,
why do we go after a country when we should have gone after the people that did it? Like we went after Osama bin Laden and killed him. We went into war against the
I think that's Obama that
we went to a war. We went right.
And took him out.
We went.
But we were still in Afghanistan for an awfully long time.
Sir, I think Biden should say proudly that he got us out of Afghanistan. Yes, the generals did a poor job of not advising him better. So wouldn't have to lose.
We did it.
No, but we're out after 20 years, and otherwise we'd still be in there. So I think that's a big plus, not a minus. I think that's a big plus, not a minus. Anyway, Leah's on the phone. Leah, thank you, Mary.
Oh,
Great call.
You're welcome.
yes. Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me join in. Great conversation so far. I, sort of mainly agree with my, as you said, a brilliant husband, Ephraim, and I think all the points brought up, were very salient. Social science, all the data shows it is not a crime deterrent at all. As your friend here pointed out, most of the crimes that are premeditated are actually, unfortunately, very well thought out, and most people usually don't get caught. Usually the crimes of passion are the ones where people are usually caught and in prison. The last thing I want to say in terms of why I don't support it sort of intellectually, emotionally, for sure support the death penalty. If anybody ever took a loved one of mine, I would want them dead. I would probably want to do it myself. Actually, though, if you look at the data, right now, most of the people that fall victim to the death penalty are poor people, usually minorities who can't afford good lawyers. And I think that fact itself in modern today, until we fix that, is a huge problem. And the other thing I'll say is, we all think to ourselves, oh my God, if our, beautiful children or our beautiful family members, if anything would ever happen to them, we would have the death penalty for the perpetrator. Of course, but, in another lifetime, one of us might have a child or a family member who's mistakenly arrested for something. And I know it's very hard for us to all put ourselves in that position, but you kind of have to play all sides. And in that, in that world, nobody would want the death penalty. So that's just
Leah, Mazel Tov and belated congratulations. And I agree with
Thank you.
I agree with every word that you said, because you clearly made such good choices. You picked a husband like Ephraim, so anything you recommend, I'm all in.
I was going to say the opposite. Right? She's smarter than right.
Well,
the fact that she's smarter than I am
Thank
is
you.
somewhat belied by our respective choices.
That's why I agree with her more than with you. Thank you, Leah. You're the best.
Yeah.
And thank you for lending us
No
your
problem.
husband. He did it under very short notice, and I love him for that. Thank you.
And thank you for agreeing with
Yeah.
me.
No.
Wait, a wife is agreeing with a husband.
It'll be
Wait,
different later, but
wait. This is a milestone. A wife is agreeing with her
Well,
husband.
we're definitely going to have to look into your Jewish lineage now that you've agreed with your husband.
I don't know if you ever heard this joke, but a guy goes to his rabbi and says, "Rabbi, my wife is trying to poison me. I'm sure she's trying to poison me. What should I do with it?" He says, "Look, don't worry. I'll talk to your wife. Come back in a week." So he says, "Okay." He comes back in a week, and the rabbi says, "I spoke to your wife 4 hours on Monday, 5 hours on Tuesday, 6 hours on Wednesday, and 8 hours on Thursday. And my advice to you is take the poison."
But, also just joking aside, I just want to add one thing to the conversation, which I think is interesting, which is, I think the emotional feeling of murder for murder, eye for an eye is very intrinsic to us as humans, and I totally get it, and I really respect Mary for what she's saying about, her emotional self would want the death penalty, but she knows maybe for America it's not the best thing. But, it's also like, where do you draw the line? So if someone's raped and sort of, spiritually robbed of their life for the rest of their life, or their ability to have an intimate relationship, should their perpetrator be raped? Or you can apply this to any other crime. And murder, yes, taking a human life, taking a physical life is awful, and it's, the worst thing ever, but there are other crimes that liken it, and we don't really have an answer to that, to liken to the death penalty. So I just think for that reason also we can't go down that route.
Thank you. And I would just add that the two things most likely to point someone in the wrong direction and make a bad decision are anecdotes and emotions, right? So we're trying to think of a system for the country, and if our emotional self is saying kill the person, but it's not backed up by logic, not backed up by data, right? You should almost not trust your emotions in that way. And when we bring an anecdote of Sandy Hook, and you can definitely bring examples of people who deserve the death penalty. But the question is,
I gave you a resolution that I'm against the death penalty if they had an appropriate punishment for what they did. So there used to be chain gangs. I don't know if you saw this. Cool Hand Luke was the name of the movie. But when I was a kid, I watched all these movies that had chain gangs, and I felt that was fair, that was appropriate, because they didn't give them they play basketball in the schoolyard, even though they killed somebody that will never play basketball, will never eat a good meal. They could have a decent meal. They could still have a steak during their lifetime, and those people can't have anything. So if they did a chain gang, if they did an appropriate punishment, I'm against the death penalty. Okay? Okay, let's take Wesley. Wesley, sorry to keep you.
Hello.
Yes, hello,
Okay.
Wesley.
Hi, how is everyone?
So far, so good.
How are you? Good.
If I may say, please don't misinterpret an eye for an eye or confuse it as conflicting with thou shalt not kill. Take the beam out of the eye before you see the mote. In other words, an eye for an eye means when you look at a person and see the things that they have done that are evil, even evil against me, let me look at myself and see what I have done that is wrong before I start saying that that person's things are wrong. And thou shalt not kill. So really, what is left for us to do when we capture someone that has done egregious and hateful violence and deathful sins against us or our family? Let us not imagine. But they should be incarcerated, but not ever killed.
Well, you know, one thing, you're very empathetic and you very make a good point about an eye for an eye. But unfortunately, people that read the Torah, and most people, overwhelmingly, even the most religious people, when they read that, they take it literally. Like Scalia says we have to take the Constitution literally, even though there were things that happened since that have to be adapted, adjusted, in fairness, changed. So most people that read the Torah say an eye for an eye means an eye for an eye. If you were there to explain every time what your explanation, then we wouldn't have that problem. You see, unfortunately, not everybody's there with you when you say an eye for an eye. I always thought it was an eye for an eye.
Well, so just to give, again, the biblical point of view, thank you for that interpretation, Wesley. But the verse continues, right? It's an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn. And there's another verse in the Torah that says, one who spills blood of a man, his blood should be spilled. So that's definitive that the Torah's view on murder is that it gets a capital punishment. Having said that, I couldn't agree with you more on the humanistic side and on coming at systems and coming at a country from a rights perspective. I do not feel that absent an age of prophecy, right, we should be in a position, assuming, again, we can fully ensure that this murderer will never murder again. And like you said, if we incarcerate him and we can be sure he won't kill anybody in prison, it's just hard for me to wrap my head personally around us being judge and jury. And here is where, again, I will kind of draw on faith, even though I said before to not, that separation of church and state is very holy in my eyes. But to the extent you are a man of faith, God has many avenues to take care of those who sin. And if, again, without the data that it's a deterrent, and again, if you can...
Maybe God's satisfied with that, but there's no satisfaction on the woman that lost the kid and said last week when they were waiting eagerly and anxiously to hear the death sentence presented by the judge, and she said clearly the lives of our kid isn't as valuable as that's such hurtfulness. And how come you and he and others aren't as vehement against the wars as you are against? I don't hear anybody speaking we should bring an end to wars. We're civilized. We've hopefully matured since the Stone Ages. At least in those days, the most they could do is a guy had to get close enough to hit you with a rock or something. Later on, even with an arrow, a bow that could shoot the rock. But as we got
Leviticus,
go ahead. Sorry.
In Leviticus is a verse, the sacrifice of the second in the manner. That manner is like the way that Eshach, Meshach, and Abednego were put into the furnace of Nebuchadnezzar. And the second is me, Wesley Ernst Curry the second. Also in Zephaniah is the howling of the second. That is me. According to the Jewish secret given to Noah, that you are not to write on paper, that you are not to tell outside of the household, The man of the earth come to bring peace, who has the dove, speaks and interprets every language known to mankind, gives Noah the plumb. And there are some words that I'm not going to, I'll say, let's blend, instead of saying what the words are. That you will know that I am that man of the earth. That tooth for a tooth has been done. I have had many people come against me, and I prayed to the Messiah of the Jews that 2 teeth be healed in every mouth on earth, and it was done.
Look, I'm still upset for Noah for saving snakes and tigers and lions. I'm really frightened of those. But in respect of what he's done, no tiger or lion or snake has ever hurt me. Only human beings hurt me. So I don't know why did he save human beings?
The snake ball, Satan, did attack me. He did say the words sad and delicious, and he did say in my head these words, for I was not cleansed completely inside. He said, I will turn and toss you violently like a ball. He said that on October 10 in the year 2005. I believe he may have done that to all on earth, a rogue angel, that Satan, that ball. And he also said, don't tell the vision on March 31st in the year 2020. And that was not Hashem, that was not God, but the devil.
Wesley, thank you for your wisdom. And you mentioned Satan. I'll tell you what a Catholic priest is at the deathbed of one of his parishioners, and he's imminently dying. So he says to the parishioner, are you ready to renounce Satan? Are you ready to renounce Satan? And he says, Father, I don't think this is a good time for me to start making any new enemies. God bless you all. Thank you for your input. I really appreciate it.
Should any of your listeners have the Jewish children that are Israel, there are 144,000 of them, and they are all Jewish, scattered worldwide. They were given these Jewish words: bad boom, boom, mark of the 10, the black, death, war, Yavol, and hell. And bad boom is the wheel in the wheel, the color of beryl. And boom is the fire enfolding in itself in Ezekiel. And the tribulation, the hell of 7 years, begins the day that goes off.
I see. So we've got
You're far too knowledgeable for me to.
The last important thing is, do not, please, heed the Messiah's words, tell the vision, and you shall not need the mark.
Okay, I have to end this because my time is up. So thank you for your call, Wesley.
Thank you, everybody.
Wesley.